What kind of man leaves a woman tied to die in the snow with her newborn babies? That was the question burning in Silas Granger's mind the moment he heard the first cry. The wind in the Wyoming Territory howled through the trees like a wounded animal, pushing against Silas as he guided his horse along the narrow trail. Snow piled high around him, swallowing the path and turning every breath into a cold bite of pain. Winter in the Snow-Horn Mountains was never kind, but that morning felt cruel in a way he could not name. Then he heard it again. A thin cry, high, sharp, scared. A baby's cry. No, more than one. Silas pulled his horse to a stop. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Out here there were no cabins, no camps, no reason for a newborn to be anywhere near this frozen trail. But the sound was real. And getting louder. He dismounted, boots sinking deep into the snow. He led his horse forward slowly, listening. His breath came out in small white clouds as he stepped into the timberline. The crying pulled him toward a clearing near an old fence post. The wood was rotted and half buried under snow, forgotten by time. Then he saw her. A woman was tied upright to the post, barbed wire wrapped around her arms and chest, digging cruelly into her torn skin. Her face was pale with cold and bruised deep purple across the cheekbones. Snow clung to her tangled hair. Her lips were cracked. Her body seemed moments away from giving out. At her feet lay 3 tiny bundles wrapped in what looked like shredded pieces of a nightgown, triplets. 3 newborn girls. 1 whimpered. The other 2 were silent and frighteningly still. Silas felt something like fire shoot through his chest. He hurried forward, dropping to his knees beside her. The cold bit into his skin, but he ignored it as he checked the babies. Their breathing was shallow, their skin too cold. They were fading fast. The woman's head moved slightly. She blinked up at him with eyes that barely held life. "Don't let them take my daughters," she whispered. Silas didn't hesitate. His voice came out steady, certain, and low. "You're coming with me." Quote. He pulled the knife from his boot and cut the barbed wire. It snapped free with a sharp sound. Blood welled where the rusted wire had torn into her skin. But she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She was too far gone for that. Her body collapsed forward. Silas caught her before she fell, holding her against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. He lifted her gently, then collected each infant one by one. He wrapped them inside his coat, close to his warmth, securing them with a wool blanket from his saddle. The wind whipped across the clearing, but Silas shielded the babies with his body and drew the woman closer. "You don't die here," he whispered. "Not you. Not them. Not on my land." He mounted the horse with care, holding her in front of him, the babies sandwiched safely between them. The climb back to his cabin was slow. The storm pushed against them, and every step felt like a fight. But Silas didn't stop. He couldn't. By the time he reached the cabin, his coat was frozen stiff. The fire had died in the hearth, and the room was filled with the sharp chill of winter. Silas kicked open the door and carried the woman inside, laying her on a bed near the fireplace. Then he took the babies and placed them in a basket lined with rabbit pelts. He worked quickly. He built a fire with hands that moved fast but steady. Sparks flew, climbing up into the rafters. Warmth began to creep through the cold shadows. The woman didn't move. The babies whimpered softly. Silas stoked the fire harder. "You're safe now," he murmured, though she was unconscious and could not hear him. "I've got you." He brought goats, milk to warm over the fire. He carved out a little feeding spoon and knelt by the basket. One by one he fed the girls tiny sips. The smallest cried, weak but alive, her tiny hands shaking. The others followed, drinking slowly. Then he turned his attention to the woman. He cleaned her wounds with warm water, wiping away dried blood and melted snow. Bruises covered her legs. Her wrists were raw. Her body was cold all the way to the bone. Whoever had done this to her wanted her dead. Silas set his jaw as he worked. Anger flared inside him, hot and heavy, but he kept his hands gentle. Hours passed before her eyelids fluttered. Her voice was thin, barely there. "My name's Marabel Quinn." Silas moved closer. "I'm Silas." Her gaze flicked to the babies, then back to him. Tears filled her eyes, slipping down cracked cheeks. She didn't sob. She didn't have the strength for it. Silas reached for a fur cloak from his old trunk and placed it beneath the babies to warm them. When he looked back, Marabel was watching him, and for the first time since he found her, there was something in her eyes other than pain. A spark, a question, a hope. Silas fed the fire again, breathing deep as warmth filled the cabin. The babies slept, soft breaths rising and falling. Outside, the snowstorm roared, covering every trail that led to the place she almost died. Inside, the crackling fire revealed something new in the air, something fragile but alive, a beginning. He sat beside her, quiet and steady, keeping watch as the night pressed in. He didn't know who wanted her dead. He didn't know why she had been left out there. But he knew one thing for sure. As long as she and those 3 girls were under his roof, no one would hurt them again. Not ever. What kind of life had Marabel Quinn escaped if death in the snow had been her only door out? Silas had wondered that ever since he carried her through his cabin door. But he didn't ask. Not at first. She was too weak, her body too broken. So he watched over her, tended the babies, and let silence do the healing. The storm had passed by morning. Pale sunlight pushed weakly through the frosted window, lighting the cabin with a soft glow. The fire had burned all night, and warmth now settled deep into the walls. Marabel lay propped up on piled blankets, her face still pale but no longer lifeless. The bruises on her skin stood out sharp and cruel in the morning light. Silas sat near her, sharpening a blade with slow and steady strokes. The cabin was still, quiet except for the small sounds of the babies shifting in their warm basket. Marabel cleared her throat. It was rough, cracked from cold and crying, but her voice held strength now. "I was 17 when I married Joseph Quinn," she said. Silas didn't look up. He kept sharpening the blade, listening. "He was 34. Wealthy, respected. My father said I should be grateful." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I thought I was. At first." Silas finally lifted his eyes. They didn't rush her. They didn't ask for more. They simply waited. Marabel went on softly, each word slow and heavy. "He brought me to a big house, tall windows, marble floors, silks and lace. But he never touched me with kindness. When Eloise was born, he frowned. When Ruth came second, he wouldn't speak to me for weeks." Her gaze drifted to the babies sleeping near the fire. When June came, his anger turned dangerous. She swallowed hard. "He said I cursed the womb. He told his brothers I was nothing but a mule. And that night, they beat me." Silas's jaw tightened. The whetstone paused against the blade. The cabin air grew heavier. Marabel pulled the blanket higher around her bruised arms. "When he tied me to that post, he told me if the snow didn't take me, then God meant for me to live." Her voice cracked. He said the girls were worthless mouths to feed. Silas rose slowly, the knife forgotten. He crossed the room and knelt beside her, taking her injured hand carefully into his. His palm was warm, steady, grounding. "Here," he said, voice low but certain, "your girls are the only thing worth feeding." Her lips trembled. Tears fell gently, warm against her cold skin. This time, she didn't try to hold them back. Hours later, after she rested, Silas moved quietly through the cabin. He carried wood, warmed milk, checked the babies, and worked without noise. The quiet between them was soft now, no longer filled with fear. By late afternoon, a knock shattered the calm. Silas stiffened. He reached for his rifle but didn't open the door right away. "Silas," a familiar voice called. "It's Hattie." He opened the door to find a woman wrapped in a green wool shawl. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her horse snorted behind her, tail swishing nervously. "Come in," Silas said. Hattie stepped inside, her eyes darting to Marabel, then the babies. "You need to hear this," she said, lowering her voice. "Joseph Quinn's put out word down in the lowlands." Marabel's breath caught. "He's telling folks you ran off, that you're unstable. Says the girls are his by right." Hattie continued, her face darkening. "He hired 4 men to bring you back." Silas didn't flinch. He only nodded once. "They'll find this place," Hattie warned, "and when they do—" "They won't take her," Silas said, voice sharp as cut stone. Marabel looked at him, startled by the certainty in his tone. Hattie reached into her coat and handed Silas a small leather pouch. "Supplies. You'll need them." He accepted it with a silent nod. Hattie stayed only a moment longer, then left as quickly as she came. The rest of the day was filled with preparation. Silas checked every door and window. He reinforced the latch. He stacked firewood high. He moved food and blankets to the root cellar. He sharpened his hunting knife until its edge gleamed like silver. Marabel watched him from the bed, her heart beating faster with every passing hour. When morning came, the air outside was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence, thick as fog. Then came the sound of hooves. Slow, heavy, 4 riders. Marabel's breath shook. She pulled her daughters close to her chest, pressing them against her heart. Silas didn't panic. He stood up, calm as stone, and went to the door. He opened it and stepped outside. 4 men approached. Their horses kicked up snow with each step. The man in front had a scar across his cheek and a revolver hooked to his hip. "Silas Granger," the man called. "We come with claim." Silas said nothing. "That woman inside is Joseph Quinn's wife," the man continued. "She's his property, and them girls too." Silas didn't move. "She was never his," he said. "And she sure ain't yours." The man sneered. "This ain't over, mountain man." "You want to test that?" Silas asked calmly. "Come back and try." The riders stared at him for a long moment. Then the lead one tugged his reins. "Not worth it today," quote. They turned and rode off, snow spraying behind them. Silas stood there long after they disappeared. Inside, Marabel clutched her daughters, her heart pounding. Relief washed over her, but fear stayed curled in her chest. They were safe for now. But she knew this wasn't finished. Not yet. How long could safety last when a man like Joseph Quinn still breathed somewhere in the lowlands? That question hung over Silas and Marabel like a storm cloud waiting to break. But spring began to soften the mountain first. The snow melted in slow, steady patches. Brown earth peeked through. Birds returned, singing sharp, bright notes that warmed the mornings. Inside the cabin, life grew stronger every day. Marabel no longer slept with fear in her eyes. Her steps grew steadier. The bruises on her skin faded from deep purple to pale yellow. The babies, Eloise, Ruth, and June, gained weight faster now. Their cheeks filled out. Their cries became louder, healthier. They slept longer and woke hungry, their tiny hands reaching for warmth and milk. Silas rose early every morning. Sometimes he hunted. Sometimes he checked traps. Sometimes he brought back wood or cleared paths around the cabin. He always returned. Always. He never asked for thanks. He never asked for anything. One afternoon, Marabel stepped outside and found Silas at his workbench, carving something from cedar wood. His sleeves were rolled up. His knife moved with slow, careful strokes. She didn't ask what he was making. She didn't need to. That night, she found 3 small wooden plaques hanging above the baby's sleeping place. Each one was carved with a name, the letters smooth and neat. Eloise, Ruth, June. Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she touched the wood. No one, not even her own kin, had ever carved her daughters' names into anything that would last. That small act felt bigger than any promise. Days grew warmer. The sun lingered on the mountains a little longer each evening. Marabel began to cook simple meals, stews, cornbread, and boiled roots. Sometimes she sang softly to the girls while she stirred the pot. Silas always listened quietly from his chair near the door. For the first time in her life, Marabel felt something she had never believed she deserved. She felt safe. But safety in the Wild West rarely lasted long. Late one afternoon, the air shifted. It carried the smell of pine and something colder, sharper. Silas paused at the window. The sky was turning dark fast, clouds rolling over the peaks like a blanket. "A storm's coming," he said. "A hard one." By dusk, the mountains roared. Snow slashed sideways against the cabin. The wind shook the shutters. The fire inside fought to hold its warmth. Silas checked every corner of the cabin one last time. Marabel held Ruth and June close, her body curled protectively around them. Eloise slept peacefully near the hearth. Then Silas froze. He stepped to the window. 3 shapes moved through the blizzard. Horses. Men, pushing through the snow with the stubborn force of people who believed they owned the world. "It's them," he said quietly. Marabel's stomach dropped. Her arms tightened around the babies. Silas turned to her, voice calm but firm. "Take the girls. Follow the creek. Stay low. Don't stop." Quote, "No," she whispered. "I won't leave you." He stepped forward, wrapped the elk cloak around her shoulders, and tucked a bundle of food into her satchel. "You need to go," he said. "I'll lead them away." She shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "What if they kill you?" Silas cupped her face gently, thumb brushing her cheek. "I'd die before I let them take you." He kissed the top of Eloise's head, then pulled back. "Now go." Marabel strapped June to her back, held the other 2 close, and disappeared through the rear door into the blizzard. Silas watched the door shut behind her. Then he moved quickly. He planted a decoy coat on a broomstick near the trail. He lit a small fire to draw attention, tied his horse's reins to a tree as if he'd left in a hurry, then hurried back to the cabin. The knock came fast. Hard. Cold. Silas opened the door. Joseph Quinn stood there, snow clinging to his hair, his eyes burning with fury. 2 armed men flanked him. "She took what's mine," Joseph snarled. "And her daughters carry my name." Quote. Silas stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "You left her to die," he said. Joseph smirked. "She's my property. I'll decide what she deserves." "She belongs to herself," Silas said, "and you won't touch her ever again." Joseph raised his pistol. "Last chance, Granger." "Move." Silas didn't move. One of the men swung his rifle. It struck Silas hard in the shoulder. He dropped to one knee. Snow soaking into his shirt as blood spread across his coat. Joseph stepped forward, gun aimed at Silas's chest. "Drop it." A voice cut through the storm. Sheriff Mather rode out of the tree line, lantern swinging. 2 deputies followed, rifles raised. Joseph spun around too late. Marabel stepped out behind the lawman, cloak torn, face pale but fierce. She pointed at Joseph. "Tell them what you did," she said, "or I will." Joseph's face drained of color. The sheriff's glare hardened. "Arrest him." The deputies moved in. Joseph struggled, shouting lies, but they forced him to the ground and bound him. His men didn't get far. They were cuffed and dragged into the storm with him. Marabel ran to Silas, dropping to her knees beside him. Blood soaked his shirt, but he was awake, breaths ragged. "You're not dying," she whispered, pressing her hand to the wound. Silas grunted, not planning on it. "Good," she said, her voice shaking, "because I'm not going to bury the only man who fought for us." He blinked up at her. Despite the pain, he smiled. "Knew you'd come back." Spring came fast after that. Silas healed slowly, but he healed. Life shifted into something new, something steady and warm. They rebuilt the cabin, making it bigger and stronger. Travelers began stopping by for stew, shelter, and safety. People called the place the Hearth at Granger Ridge. The girls grew fast, walking, laughing, filling the cabin with life. Marabel taught children from nearby homesteads how to read. Silas tended to the trails, hunted, and fixed anything that needed fixing. One evening, after the girls fell asleep, Silas stepped onto the porch. Marabel followed him with 2 mugs of tea. They sat side by side, hands brushing. The sunset stretched gold across the mountains. Marabel whispered, "This fire between us, it never went out." Silas glanced at her, his eyes soft. He just needed a place to live. She took his hand. He held hers back. The world around them was quiet, safe, alive. And after everything they had survived, they finally knew. Home wasn't 4 walls. Home was each other.